Should read start with number 3. Says, is African tribalism universal? Did modern West Africans kill off the ancient inhabitants of West Africa? Of course, this came with a link to YouTube. We'll watch it and then we'll discuss.
When it comes to discussions about West African identity and the origin of West African cultures, many ideologues promote the Saharan hypothesis that state that the principal ancestors of modern West Africans are the ancient Saharan inhabitants of West Africa that migrated south to coastal Refugia around 5,000 years ago, without any direct association or affiliation with the cultures of the Happy River Valley, particularly the pharaonic culture of ancient Kimi. There are many critical flaws of this hypothesis. Its proponents are engaged in what is called geographic determinism and isolationism through the application of the defunct Garden of Eden principle. In simpler terms, these ideologues believe that the totality of cultures and peoples in West Africa developed from ancient times without any major contributions from other parts of the continent. The one fatal flaw of their thinking is the fact that the Sahara housed cultures associated with every stage of human development: Homo erectus, archaic humans, and modern Homo sapiens sapiens. This doesn't mean that these cultures are directly connected to each other just because of geographic proximity. Massive gaps between the terminal Saharan cultures and the first contemporary states in West Africa exist. For example, there is almost a 1,000-year gap between the end of the Tichik culture and the onset of Ouagadougou. What these researchers miss is the fact that these ancient Saharan hunter-forager populations were subsumed by agropastoralists who migrated into West Africa and developed territorial states from 4 to 1.5 thousand years ago. According to the analysis of Dr. Kevin McDonald, the microlithic cultures of these ancient West Africans, as well as their languages, have been lost. The Jaala people of northeast Nigeria, who speak a language isolate, are believed to be their direct descendants. In fact, many West Africans have terms for the ancient inhabitants of West Africa that their ancestors met when migrating from the east to their current location. On the flip side, there is a complete absence of a collective memory of the ancient Sahara by most modern West African groups. According to the Dogon, the Yeben and the Andumbu came in the current region first. The Telem came next around the 11th century, and then came the Dogon or Ka'ador around the 16th century in the Bandiagara area. The Mande and Dogon revere the proprietary rites of these ancients in their modern rituals. The Soninke call the 4th century immediate predecessors of the Ouagadougou cultures the Goloma, and refer to the collective groups related to the ancient Tichik culture as the Kokolo, for ancient ones. The Bozo and the Sakarwa fishermen are Mande groups considered the current oldest people in the Niger region, and they both speak about short red men who existed there before them. The Malinke call these people Woklo. The Susu of Guinea speak about diminutive populations called Doki. The Wolof call these ancient West Africans Gondro. And among other Malinke, they were called Komokudumi. Among the Masi, they are called Kinkirsi. Among the Songhai, they are called Arakurma. Among the Gorma, they are called Apola. And among the Kurumba, they are called Atijia. The peoples of Liberia call them Jina. So as you can see, many West Africans have oral traditions and lexical terminology to define the ancient populations that existed in West Africa before them and that they replaced upon migrating into the region. So when we examine the Saharan hypothesis and the material cultural evidence that exists in the Sahara, from artifacts to petroglyphs, the direct links between the ancient Sahara and modern West Africa are restricted to faunal industries or industries related to animals. Outside of simple propositions about body paint and lithic ornaments, the ancient Saharan cultures do not have much to offer in terms of explanations about the major sociocultural roots of modern Africa. Though the ancient Sahara was a preliminary ancestral step, the Happy River Valley complex is the immediate direct ancestral cradle of the cultures of contemporary Africa. We see this in the common Paleo-African cultural substratum and mode of production seen from classical Kimi Kush to contemporary Africa. The governing socio-political structure and sovereignty correspondences with respect to the body as a container of forces, seen by the Nasut of Kimi, the Mvun of the grass fields of West Cameroon, the Mogonaba of the Masi, the Kayamaga of Ouagadougou, and the Ohene among the Akan establish general commonalities. We don't find any descriptive examples of kingship in the ancient Sahara. The systematic theology using Dr. Leah Luca's solar epistemology correspondences between the transcendent one, the creator, and the eternal verb seen in the Happy River Valley divination systems, the Lakam systems of the Grassfields people of West Cameroon, the Odinani system of the Igbo, and the Ifa of the Yoruba also establish commonalities between the pharaonic civilizations and contemporary West Africans, and more particularly the near-identical components between the Ama divination system of the Ka'ador or Dogon people of West Africa and the Ama divination system of Kimi and Kush cannot be explained using ancient Saharan petroglyphs during the Bovidian pastoral period. So they're basically too close, the Dogon spiritual systems and the systems of ancient Kimi and Kush, to just simply chalk it off to an ancient Saharan bond. It's a more recent direct bond that speaks to an east to west migration across the Sahel that the ancestors of the Dogon people traveled. The archaeology of the Neolithic Sahara does not match the founding narratives of the first West African states. The relatively peaceful Chepka period of the ancient Tichik culture, for example, does not correspond to the founding warfare narratives of the Ouagadougou Empire. Those scholars such as Hole have attempted to use geographic determinism and rainmaking as a mediator of stress in the power of the snake deity Bida. Rain for Dinka Sise and the founders of the Ouagadougou functions in tandem with the recurring natural phenomenon. Rainmaking alone is not enough to establish ethnogenesis specifically for the Soninke, because this power and process exists in the same fashion among the Serer and the Fulani. We can't use this to say that they also descend from Tichik. And on the flip side, rainmaking alone does not explain the many other deities within the Soninke pantheon and their role in the founding of Ouagadougou. The toponymic network, where we see place names like Kimi, Kaukau, and Kara in Eastern Africa being exported to West Africa as Kumbi, Gao, and Gara, also show basic commonalities speaking to this migratory origin. Epigraphs and the grapheme analog seen between Mdudunter and the many West and Central African writing systems like Akauku of the Bamum, Nsibidi of the Ejagam and Igbo people, as well as other cross-river peoples, speaks to a direct relationship. And this is important due to Dr. Musa Lamb's architectonic analysis of the spatio-temporal evolution of agricultural and aquatic toolkits from the Happy River Valley prototypes that developed into forms that we now see in West and Central Africa. And this evolution, uncovered by Dr. Musa Lamb, reaches a delicacy that excludes the possibility of parallelism. The Mur farming tool developed from a plant fiber-braced timber prototype in ancient Kimi and Kush to a rivet-fastened metallic tool in Senegambia. The Kanjandu and Ilir garden hose were used for saturated soils. The weaved wicker baskets of the Happy River Valley evolved into timber bowls defined by grip handles in Senegambia. The harpoon instruments of ancient Kimi developed into nylon coinoidal tools in Senegambia that firmly connect the harpoon to the shaft. Lost wax casting systems developed from Happy River Valley prototypes to inter-African innovations from Ghana to Cameroon, where crucible attachments were used to control the gas pressure and metallurgical flow during the casting process. The Ngulu sword of Congo evolved from the Kopes sword in ancient Kimi, developing a non-cutting back edge with semicircular concavity. The handle is wrapped in wires and contains 3 timber spheres. The Heka scepter of ancient Kimi evolved into the Hogon scepter of Mali, with an inflected hook, a midpoint disc handle, and a sharpened endpoint. A variation of this design is the Hogon Kabyline scepter. The Was scepter prototype of ancient Kimi developed into a uniquely fabricated, freshly trimmed beam placed in fire to augment its elasticity and treated with oil to augment its material resistance and aesthetic qualities. The Happy River Valley headrest evolved into anthropomorphic models throughout Africa while retaining the same composition, base, and upright hanger. Urban societies and the structural tectonics of building systems of modern Africa find many roots in the first dynasty of ancient Kimi. Because the Green Sahara existed prior to the urbanization period, the roots of contemporary African infrastructure cannot be found there. Through an extensive comparative archaeological and historical analysis, it is clear that one must place both the Sahara and the Happy in its proper context. Though the Green Sahara, with its Roundhead, Kiphian, and Tenarian cultures, does offer valuable understanding in terms of the foundational, aqualithic, and pastoral ancestry of Kimi and Kush, it cannot fully articulate the full origins and evolutionary roots of contemporary Africa. The Pharaonic civilization, however, is where we find a mass compendium of evidence that proves that it is the immediate cultural cradle of the majority of Africa's modern cultures.
Yes, indeed. That's Cam Diverse. Cam Diverse must be a PhD student doing a dissertation on this topic. He really is dedicated to the topic, but I get it. I get the idea. Yes, sir.
This is I don't have no beef with Cam Diverse, but this is academic gobbledygook. This is academic gobbledygook. You know, I am begging brothers like Cam G Verse and people of his ilk. The fact that Walter Rodney wrote a book called Groundings with My Brothers, where he was able to show the brothers in Jamaica, the Rastafarian brothers in Jamaica, get out of the university and show on a practical level his philosophical and theoretical understandings about all the things he learned in academia, bring it down on a practical academic level. No, not applicable level to the street brothers in Jamaica. This brother is he's an intellectual. He's a African-minded intellectual. I have no problem with that. But how many people are you gonna reach in terms of the things that you learn in academia? In trying to relate these things to your people, and empower your people, Your people are not at this level. How many people really are you going to reach to empower your people at this level? Very few. Many of your people need good knowledge and understanding about simple things about the world, let alone the complexities of the things that you're talking about. And I'm saying that you need to study what Walter Rodney did and the things of what they did in trying to empower the people throughout the Caribbean. This is not, for me personally, who are you trying to appeal to with this knowledge and information? Who are you trying to appeal to, brothers? You know what I mean? You have real brothers out here who have real issues and real problems. Is this going to be empowering to them? You're speaking way above their heads. Way above their heads. It's good to have knowledge and information, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. You smart and intelligent. You can make nice videos, but how is this empowering to the masses of Black people who I don't know if you're trying to reach them or not. You know what I mean? You need to break things down to a level of where people could understand these things, apply these things in their daily lives, and empower the things that you're trying to teach people. And I think that this is not the way. Me personally, I think that this is not an effective way of going about it. You know what I mean? 100 people maybe could follow along exactly with the things that you're saying. This is the problem I have with the academicians. Academicians stay in the ivory towers. They stay in the ivory towers, and they never could reach. This is and because y'all are creating a void, because of what you telling to people are not relatable. The Jay-Z's and the Rick Rosses, the things that they saying what's happening in the streets here and right now is applicable to them. So they digest that material as opposed to this good information that you giving to them, because this is not relatable. You have to speak even in a language that's relatable to the people. And this is far removed. And if you can't break these things down in applicable elementary level, your education is in vain. You're only teaching to the people who could follow along with this kind of information. And it's very few. So what's the point of your information? What's the point of your intellect? If it's not empowering to your community. I really don't see the connection. I really don't. And I am begging brothers like you to be able to make these things translatable because you are speaking Spanish right now. So it's annoying to me. It's annoying now. I don't mean to be speaking. I talking kind of loud, you know, with the greatest respect to Cam Verse and brothers like him. Try your best to try to make these things relatable and elementary, because your brothers them are not on that level yet. You know, you must try to improve their circumstance and speak to them on a level where you could raise the consciousness of these brothers them on the street, because they ain't thinking on this level yet. And you have to work in stages. So I think that do that work first before you get to this point, because this is not empowering at all, at all. But I'll leave it there, brother.
Thanks for that, Buana. I will echo one thing Buana's saying, which is with videos like this, I would say tie it back. You know, during the duration of the video, tie it back to what it is you really want the people to get. And I think what's wanted here is that, you know, we are West African derived, but we aren't the original West African people. We are from elsewhere, and there's proof, there's clues, right? The way we farm, the tools we use, we see it in Kemet, we see it across the continent. So, you know, just remind people why this is happening, because you're making the point that all of it is you. All of Africa is yours. You know, we had all of it, starting in Egypt and spreading out. But without further ado, let's welcome in the brother from the video, Cam Verse. ¿Cómo está?
What's good? What's happening? I can't really see how many people are on the panel. I think I heard Buana, give his take, and he's actually commented on my videos a few times, giving me this advice. And it's kind of interesting because, I've actually heard people give the opposite advice in the sense of saying that I don't have any sources for my claims. So like, that's kind of why, like my initial intention behind the platform was to be able to provide scholastic rigor with respect to African-centered knowledge and information, because a lot of people tend to have the idea that the Afrocentrist is not rigorous and is not scientific and is more emotional and ideological as opposed to methodological. So that's kind of the reason why. And I could say that, even great erudite scholars like Cheikh Anta Diop and Theophilo Benga, the vast majority of the African world was not really able to, interact or engage with their scholarship because it was at a very high doctorate level, even postdoctoral level. But that wasn't necessarily their role. Their role was to have that initial fight within the academy. And then other people who are, educators on more of a basic level or primal level, kindergarten, K through 12 in America. And I know you do primary, secondary, and terminal in Europe. Those scholars were able to perform the translations necessary for the students that they were speaking to. And I would like to also say that, this is not my only platform. And I do have a lot of other interactions that I do with much younger kids, kids more so from K to like fifth grade or sixth grade. And, I definitely have my way of articulating these things to them. And a lot of people online don't necessarily see that content, even though I'm beginning to produce more of it, for this YouTube platform. But I think you would be, heavily mistaken if you thought that this way of communication or this way of interacting was the only way, and I didn't have other aspects of myself even outside of the internet. So, I definitely understand where Buana is coming from. And I definitely understand the point of, most brothers and sisters are not necessarily college graduates. They haven't taken anthropology, linguistics, or history. So it could be difficult to follow along, right? But at the same token, a lot of this stuff is real in the sense that, you have Dr. or not Denzel Washington being casted to play Hannibal from Carthage, or the whole Cleopatra controversy, or even, Gods of Egypt movie controversy, where, Black people, specifically African Americans, but more so Africans across the Afrospora, the continent and the diaspora, are being castigated, demonized for even trying to connect with the pharaonic civilization. But the importance of that and the thesis in the video was to describe like the classical evolution of African civilizations and even have a stance against tribalism, because that was, Sheikh Anta Diop and Theophilo Benga's main point in articulating the cultural unity of Black Africa was to move against tribalism from their analysis, which came from the partitioning of the African continent by European imperialists, to show the different historical unities of African populations linguistically, archaeologically, culturally, theologically, and with our spirituality. That's the reason that they did that. And this specific video was to speak to the idea of West African origins and the idea of where West Africans come from and if tribalism is universal. Because on one hand, you could say that maybe it is if you look at what happened to the ancient hunter-gatherers who used quartz microlithic technologies in West Africa prior to 4,000 years ago. They were eventually wiped out, and some people say assimilated by modern West Africans. And on the flip side, if you were to look at the prototypes of West African material cultures, their farming tools, their building tools, some of the aqualithic tools that they used in fishing, you don't really find any of these prototypes in the majority of the Saharan, excavations, and you definitely don't find them in ancient, West Africa, which is why Sheikh Anta Diop said he spoke against suspending the history of Africa in air, because without connecting it to the pharaonic civilization, you don't really have much. You can't really prove the evolution of where these material cultures came from. So all of that is sort of wrapped into one with the information of the video. And, I definitely, again, I appreciate the feedback, both negative or positive, because it gives me something to think about in terms of refining the content for the future.
Kamji, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I just feel like you are having an academic fight in a public forum. The brothers them are not on that level, brother. I understand that you have the intellect to be able to break down these things in an elementary level. I'm saying to myself, you understand how YouTube works. You've been on YouTube for a while. You understand the level of where the regular brothers on the internet are at. But I feel like, and it's not to say that you shouldn't put out this material. I'm just saying that it's a very high-minded intellectual fight that you are waging with most of the. I don't know if you trying to. Are you trying to direct this towards the public Black community or the academia in terms of white academia and scholarship in terms of that level? Who are you trying to target in terms of the content? That's what I want to ask.
I mean, no, that's a very good question, and I get asked that question a lot, even by my friends and family who are aware of this. And I would say that my outlook in making this content is looking at the future, 20, 30 years from now. Hopefully the future generations still have access to this and like an internet vault. And I want them to say that even though people today didn't necessarily believe in Black intellect, that Black people can be just as intellectual as white people, as Asians, wherever or whatever. Because in that sense, the academic fight, you can't discount the academic fight, because that is definitely part of any type of development of knowledge, right? You always had a register of conflict within this professional realm, right? But like I said, this isn't the only thing that I do. Like if you were to see me on a Saturday at Saturday school tutoring some kids, you would see a different side of me, right? And that side wouldn't necessarily be applicable here, because when you're talking to a fourth grader, it doesn't necessarily work that way, right? So, but to answer your question again, when I look at the people who they have conversations about, Christianity, they may have conversations about, philosophy, and people of other communities, they're able to, have a back and forth without necessarily getting into, the chitlin circuit that you may see in Black spaces. I want Black people to be able to have those same high level conversations, right? And be able to reflect a higher sense of being and be civilized and be able to engage in that fashion.
That's a fair statement. That's a fair statement. That's a fair analysis. But what I would say is this, and I think that you're intelligent enough to understand that what YouTube is all about, and the masses and the appeal of the masses. And I think that your intellect not only could be used in terms of the battle that you were waging in terms of academia, but on an elementary level, where where we find ourselves, the brothers, regular brothers, where we find ourselves. I think that you have the sophistication to be able to speak to people on a very elementary level and bring them up to to the sophistication of which you speak of. And I understand you are talking in terms of the future. Maybe 30 years from now, people will be on a level to be able to understand and clearly go through in terms of the different kinds of analysis that you go through. But I'm saying that you have to reach your brothers away. Don't forget us. Don't forget us. Don't forget us.
Yeah.
Don't forget us who
And I'd
are
also
not.
say,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, don't forget us who may not necessarily be on that level yet to attempt to raise the level of consciousness of brothers and sisters like us from one stage to the next stage to the next stage to reach to that level to where we can have these kinds of Jordan Peterson discourses. Yeah, I just don't forget about us as well, because I think that this is you're recruiting soldiers whether you realize it or not, because we'll have more of your back in terms of academia when you raise the consciousness of a regular brother and sister on the street level. But if you just appealing to academia is few and far between. You know that. But when, like you say, when you grounding with your brothers, when you grounding your brothers on a street level, you're recruiting more soldiers. And I just, maybe it's not a critique. It's just something that I would want you to consider in the future going forward. You understand what I'm saying or no?
Well, I feel what you're saying, and I think
Okay.
like what I'm glad about is the fact that there's not necessarily many disputes with the information presented in the video, which makes me see it as correct in this space in particular, right? So I'm glad about that. And I would also say that I do have a team of people that I work with. There's some YouTubers. I don't know if you're familiar with Pan African James Designs, and I have other scholars that I work with who do present, generally speaking, more simplified content, right? So like there's a bite out there for everybody if you're looking for it. And I also, as I said before, like I'm actually gonna post a child related or children related video. It's gonna be the first one that I've ever posted on this platform. So I do actually have uh, videos that I'm going to direct towards children planned in the future. But at the same token, like this, in this space, I get a little bit more positive feedback in the sense you guys want to simplify it, but you don't necessarily disagree with the content. Other spaces that are more tribalist, like you're dealing with West African tribalists, Zumalis, and just they will say that the information is not validated or the source, right? And that's for the rigor on the flip side, because if somebody's saying I'm not rigorous enough, I have to dot my I's and cross my T's to make sure that everything's on point. And I know y'all understand that. So I got to fight the battle on both sides.
So we want the new John Henry Clarks. We want the new Dr. Benz. We just don't know how to follow you all. So it's like, okay, you know what I mean? It's okay. So, but you understand the Collins in which the John Henry Clarks and Ben Yosef used to talk, and they used to create stories because they understood the audience was as such where you have to break things down in a way that people who may not necessarily be in academic can follow along. We want to back the new John Henry Clarks of the world. We want to back the new Ben Yosef, Ben Buchanans of the world. However, we won't be able to understand it in a way that we understand what we should back. Give us a reason why we should back you all. Talk to us in our language. You know what I mean? So that's the only thing I would say in making any kind of critique or criticism or suggestion in going forward. That's the only thing I would say. But I'll leave it there, brother.
In the chat, Trigger Happy 262 Plus says the academic fight is the intellectual wing of the Black Power movement in that sense. It's also a battlefield. Kamji, without giving up personal information and whatnot, are you working on a book or a course, or like the type of information you're putting out there, what's the general purpose or intention for
Well,
your work?
you stated it a little bit earlier. Both and, to answer your question, I am in the process of, pursuing higher education. I still have to get some of the details worked out with my advisors, but I am in communication, active communication, and active participation in getting work published and pursuing, the next level of education.
I figured that. Yeah, that's dope. That's dope. I like it. Um, I hear what Buana's saying. For me, I don't poo-poo it too much. I think if you have to level up to understand what's being discussed, I think that's a good thing for the average person. You probably won't get the uninitiated, but those who have a little something under their belt in this type of space, you'll probably get them to pause for a minute at least and ponder what it is that you're saying. Cammy, before we move on, I'd like to ask you, what would you like the Black equals African person today? What would you like them to understand that they could use today about their origins, not just simply being of West African, beginnings, but from across the continent, and carrying on Africanisms and Kemetisms, etc., from from those days to the present. What would you like the average African listening to this show? What would you like them to get from that knowledge?
I would, going back to Diop's quote about sustaining, I would want them to know that they should be confident in knowing that not only is the Pharaonic civilization a product of Black people and the Black world, but it represents the apex of African cultures, of traditional African cultures. And that classical apex is needed in terms of developing Africa in the modern world. Because in order to perform development, I actually work in structural analysis. You actually have to understand the evolutionary prototypes. You have to understand the root that came before the tree. And if we can understand those classical roots, then we could be more developed technologically, whether it's in the military, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in, marine biology, or whatever field that we come across. We could actually be able to engage within the modern 21st century African Renaissance if we understand the accuracy and the validity behind our classical evolutionary roots within the Pharaonic civilization. So understand that is our bastion, that is our hope, that is our climax, our apex, and we could rebuild that in the modern world if we remain confident in ourselves and our ability to do what we will.
I appreciate that, Cam Diverse. Buana, any last words you want to add here?
No, I just want to say thank you, Cam Verse, for giving great information, and intellectual information, and intellectual vigor to YouTube. I don't want to come off being negative in any way, in terms of what your work is. Like I say, I give you my opinions, just an opinions, but I appreciate your work. I'm a great listener of the things that you I listen to the things that you provide in terms of intellectual information for the internet. But that's if I was to have any kind of criticisms, you know what they are. Moving forward, like I say, for the future John Henry Clarks of the world and the future Ben Buchanans of the world, this is just my critique in terms of going forward. Just remember the brothers on the corner. Remember the brothers on the corner. Yeah, speaking our language and our parlance. But
Yeah.
but like I say, I respect your work and in terms of what you're trying to do. So I'll just leave it there.
I appreciate that.
Cam, do me a favor and stick around. We have another one of your topics coming up.
Yeah, sure.
Last of the night. In the meantime, let me just read what Trigger Happy 262 said. He said, "The academic fight is the intellectual wing of the Black Power movement. In that sense, it's also a battlefield." He says, "Joke when he initially was getting into this scholarship, it wasn't necessarily about just our glory, but to find the common origins of African origins to build a federated state too. He says, so in a sense, how can we build Pan-Africanism without finding our common origins? I actually like those comments there, Trigger Happy. In the meantime, let's go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 4. If you want to join the panel, just click the link. It's pinned to the top of the chat. Ladies, the invitation has been open and reoccurring. We need more of you up on the panel. And, some of you fellas in the chat, sometimes you can come up and lend your voice to the discussions, especially when we're shorthanded like we are tonight.